Well, hello and welcome to this week's Countryside programme here on Max Radio with Kiri Cohen and myself, Simon Clark. And it was great to hear a bit of nostalgia on this week's programme, Kiri.
It is important to remember the days gone by, and it was great to catch up with Roland Baker on his return home from Alaska. But growing up on the Manx farms, the change in the farmer now when he's come back, it's quite colossal really, and so very, very different. And I suppose it's the same with the railways as well now, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's strange to look back at it, you know. I mean, my dad's twin brother, he emigrated to Australia, and as a Manx person, you think all them years ago, it must have been such a tough decision to do for somebody.
It really must have been to up sticks and go, because there was no internet to organise travel, and we're so reliant on all these schedules that we have nowadays. But they just followed the wind and away they went, and yeah, what an adventure it must have been.
Yeah, and it was certainly an adventure for me with railway enthusiast and volunteer Mike Buttle. We went along the railway section, the closed one now, of course, in the late 60s, I think it was, when it shut down the steam train from the Foxdale area through Peel and all the way to Ramsey. And it was such a nice walk with Mike along there. We're at the railway station at Kirkmichael. We went to Glenwillan where the viaduct was. And of course, you're lucky in a way, Kiri. You still have the steam train running through your land, don't you?
It's a lovely sight, especially at the springtime when that first train of the season comes through. You know that summer is on its way, and it's such a nice relief to see the back of winter. But what immaculate condition it is in, and the upkeep of the railway tracks. It's just a shame that one had to go, isn't it, out west?
Yeah, does it stop on your land for it to give a lift?
It doesn't stop with us, but Ballysal is only 2 miles away. So.
All right, let's hear it all, that nostalgia here in this week's Countryside.
Manx Radio's Countryside is brought to you by NFU Mutual.
Hello and welcome to this week's Countryside here on Manx Radio. I'm Simon Clark.
And I'm Kiri Kermode. This week I catch up with Roland Baker to talk about growing up on Manx farms before moving out to Alaska.
And I talked to Mike Buttle, a railway enthusiast and volunteer, and had a walk with him along the old railway line at Kirkmichael, which was the scene of some nostalgic return in the last couple of weeks. Well, Kiri, the steam train heads past your land, I think, on its way from Douglas and Port Erin and the return journey, doesn't it?
It does. It cuts through the bottom of our fields with the main home farm above the track and the lower small fields beside the ferry bridge there. It is always a delightful sight to see it go underneath the Blackboards Bridge with a big puff of smoke and a hoot before it gets to Bollin Woods.
Do you have to go across the lines on any parts of the field?
We do. We cross the track quite a number of spots, but in the winter months when it doesn't run, we used to walk the sheep along it, and it was always a handy shortcut with the traffic getting quite heavy. But we don't do so much of that now with the modern trailers and such like. So, but it was always a worry that the train might all of a sudden appear when we were little running along the track.
Yeah, well, I went on a nostalgic walk with Mike Buttle, a railway enthusiast and volunteer for the Isle of Man steam trains and the railways and the upkeeps of them. And I had a walk with him along the section of the railway track at Kirkmichael, there around the Glenwillan area, and then at Kirkmichael station. And, well, it's been the scene of something special over the last 2 weeks, I put to Mike. Firstly, Mike, we're here at Kirkmichael station, the fire station now, but it's pretty nostalgic looking around, but it's been the hive of activity recently with something special that went on.
Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, a locomotive and carriage were brought up here by a low loader and put on display in front of the station building. So, first time a steam train has been up here for 50 years. How about that?
Really? And they had the track laid out and everything?
2 or 3 panels of track, just enough for it to sit on. There was never a question of it being in steam. It was purely a static display, although there was a smoke generator put in the firebox at one stage during the proceedings, which was quite exciting.
And how did this all come about?
Something to commemorate the 50th year of the railway through here closing. In fact, the whole of the North Line and the Peel Line, they all shut down in 1968. Peel Line had opened in 1873, the line up to the north opened in 1879, and they ran continuously up until the mid-1960s, then closed down for a year. Reopened again under Lord Ailsa in 67, ran through till 68. He lost an absolute fortune on it, and so at the end of the 1968 season, he made the decision to close the railway down.
Yeah, I remember as a nipper with my dad watching the motorbikes at Rencullen, And I remember them saying, "Wow, there's the steam train going past," which seemed to be surprised at them. I was probably 5 or 6 at the time, and that's probably the last time that it was ever seen on this route here.
It would have been round about that time, yeah. We'd use the train quite often. My grandfather had relations up in Ramsey, and we'd often be taken as a family up to see them. And then for the 67 and 68 seasons, we had a seasonal pass. And so really the whole of the railway system was our playground for those 2 summers, and it was absolutely fantastic.
But why did this particular one close? I mean, this, I think, ran from Ramsey to St John's or somewhere, did it?
It did. It was opened by the Manx Northern Railway. Never really made them any money. They had the perfect storm of tragic events happen to them. They tied themselves to a disastrous lease with the Foxdale Railway, which was very profitable for the Foxdale Company, but disastrous for the Northern. Dumbbells Bank crashed, and of course the opening of the electric railway to Ramsey took away all their passengers. So it never really made any money. Perhaps in the first couple of years it scraped through, but after that it just lost money as it ran.
Why weren't people using the route along here to Peel and say?
There wasn't a population, Simon, at that time. I mean, Kirkmichael and Ballaugh were only very little villages then, if you remember. It's only in recent years, since all the development has gone on, that they've really expanded. So there wasn't. I don't think there was really enough people here in the first place to justify building it. But the Victorians, not a little detail like that wouldn't put them off.
But I mean, the dismantling of for yourself, who has been involved in it all your life. I mean, I suppose you remember the tracks getting taken up and the water bowsers overhead and the stations, I suppose, being sold off.
Yeah, the tracks were all lifted in the mid-1970s. We had a walk along them, I think, in 1974, while the tracks and the sleepers rolled down. I think we walked most of the Northern Line, but it was all taken up and sold for scrap.
But it must have been pretty sad times, Mike, for yourself, seeing it and being involved with your dad and granddad for many years, and you being here to see it getting taken apart, really.
Yeah, nothing worse than seeing a railway being dismantled, and especially the way it was carried about. There was no finesse about it. They just dragged the stuff off with tractors and, cut it up with oxy cutters. It wasn't a sight you'd want to stand and watch for any length of time at all.
Well, we're looking at this building now that's run by the Kirkmichael Fire Brigade, and it's pretty special and absolutely in pristine condition.
They look after it well, don't they? The building itself is built out, Manx building built out of local Peel red sandstone, and a very distinctive twin gable design, which was typical of stations on the Northern Line. The stations at St Germans and up at Ballaugh and Sulby were all built to exactly the same design as this. And the Fire Brigade do a fantastic job looking after it. If you go inside, the inside of it is almost exactly the same as it was the day it sold its last ticket to a passenger for the train.
Wow, it's incredible. I mean, this design, was this sort of unique all over the UK, Mike?
No, this was a special design just for the Isle of Man.
Really?
Yeah.
And they're still standing today, and a lot of them, I suppose, are in private ownership now, and are many kept to this sort of look.
The old station up at Sulby Bridge is a beautiful restoration job to a private dwelling. St Germans as well is a private dwelling. At Ballaugh, the building similar to the one here at Kirkmichael at Ballaugh was demolished in the 70s, unfortunately. So all that's left up Ballaugh is the goods shed, and the little station at Peel Road was only wooden anyway, so that was burnt down when the railway closed. And there's another stone building up at Lazaire, but where Ramsey Station was is the site of Ramsey Bakery now.
Right, and this route, I suppose, looking down the line now, I ride it on the push bike sometimes as well, and it has got that beautiful country feel to it, and it's so sad to think that it's not there. I mean, could it reopen?
The dreamer in me says yes, please. The realist in me says no chance.
Right. The reasons?
There's just too many problems to encounter. The two big viaducts are long gone, of course. It cost long.
Is that at the Glenwillan there?
Glenwillan and Glenmore,
Right.
two big viaducts going across there. They've gone. It cost a fortune to replace those. But that would just be the start of your troubles, really, because the whole of the line around the Gobbedagan area is just slipping into the sea. Since we've started doing our railway walks, we've been doing it for about 10 years now, and we've seen the track bed slip by a good 12 foot in that time. So it's all on its way down towards the sea.
No generous landowners that would give you a strip to sort of move it inland a bit?
Well, if you put £1 million a mile to replace it, Simon, I'm sure we could come to some sort of arrangement.
£1 million a mile, is that what they reckon it would cost her?
Apparently so.
Wow, £1 million a mile. But there's a head start here, Mike, when we look across Station Road there.
Yeah, there's a couple of lengths ready for us just to join on to. Handy, eh?
Are they the original ones?
They are, yes. The ones going across the road, part of the original level crossing. There were 2 lines went across the road, and the other side of the gate that's there is a replica. It's not an original gate. But the other side of that was the water tank for the locos, where they'd stop and refuel their water tanks after the journey up from St John's, because it was all the way uphill from St John's here, so there'd be a good chunk of water taken out by the time they got up to Kirkmichael, so it was a good opportunity to fill the tanks up. And then going on a bit further down, we'll go out towards Glenwillan and have a look.
Well, we've moved along, Mike Buttle, to the Glenwillan here, where the viaduct used to go over. The pillars are still standing though.
Yeah, just waiting for the new
Similar
bridge.
stone?
Yeah, just waiting for the new bridge to be put on top of them, eh?
But there must have been a spectacular view over the top of here when it was in full flight with holidaymakers.
Absolutely. This was one of the holiday hotspots back in the day, of course. The Glen was owned and operated by the railway company, who always had a keen eye to make extra money from their passengers whenever they could. So they operated Glenwillan as a pleasure park. So as we look over the Glen here, now if you can imagine seeing the cafe and the bowling green, tennis courts, boating lake, playground for children and that, all kept immaculately. And now, of course, it's one of the island's biggest camping areas.
I mean, when you're inside where the railway embankments either side of you are and looking over the viaduct here to the other side, it just make you feel like, wow, wouldn't it be nice if this was back in working action? Because certainly the one that leaves Douglas, heads down through Castleton, stops at Port Erin and comes back, it seems to have gained popularity in recent years, Mike. Is that fair to say?
I think it is fair to say, yeah. Passenger figures have been up for the past 4 to 5 years, and they keep on the increase. And innovations like the dining train have brought people onto the railways that wouldn't have normally travelled on them. So that's been a great thing.
Yeah, and how original are them coaches, carriages and engines that are still running?
This is the great thing about the Isle of Man Steam Railway, that everything that runs on it was built specially for it. There's nothing being imported from anywhere else. You get quite a few of the heritage railways across the water, the narrow gauge ones in Wales and whatever, and they've brought locomotives and stock in from wherever they could get them, basically. But here on the Isle of Man, everything that runs here was built to run here.
Are they a special size?
They are. The railway runs on a 3-foot gauge, the steam railway, same as the Manx Electric between Douglas and Ramsey. So it's quite an unusual gauge. You'd have to go. There were a number of 3-foot gauge lines over in Ireland, but then after that you'd have to go out to South Africa and Australia to find 3-foot.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, you take people for walks and talks along this, and I mean, just talking to you now, Mike, you're just sort of waiting for a train to go past. It conjures that in your mind, though.
Yeah, we like to think so. We like to try and bring the atmosphere of the old railways when we take people on the walks. We must do about half a dozen walks a year, and this is my favourite one. This walk between Kirkmichael and St John's. Because there's such a lot to talk about. I mean, he had 7 stations or stops along the way, so there's plenty to talk about. The countryside you pass through is absolutely fantastic. The views are incredible. And this is the difference between the Ramsey line and the Peel line. The Peel line is now the Heritage Trail, and really 50 years of growth either side of the path there has taken away any view that there ever was. So this is really great to take people in. And when we take the walks, we have either a tablet with us or a couple of folders. So when we get to spots along where we've got a picture of how things were in the old days, we can stop and show them the picture and let them imagine them being back in the scene.
Well, there, Mike Buttle with some great memories and great knowledge of the steam trains that were run from the Foxdale area through Peel and St German all the way to Ramsey through the Kirkmichael and Ballaugh, and there with him at the wonderful station that's still at Kirkmichael that they use for the fire services there now.
It is lovely. It must have been great in the days before the cars. What a great method of transport to get grain and crops and different things from one end of the island to the other. But now it's only used as
mountain bikers and the railway. Of course, this water services and bits and pieces are under it now. So I suppose it make it a little bit more difficult. £1 million a mile.
My
to
goodness
put it
me.
back. There you go. You're listening to Countryside here on Manx Radio with Kiri Kermode and myself, Simon Clark. And you've been out and about getting some nostalgic memories, Kiri?
That's right. Roland Baker grew up on the Manx farms in the south of the island, and some of the farms that I farm today, he has lots of memories on too. But he packed his bags and took off to Alaska and spent his last 50-odd years there before returning back to the island, where I just caught up with him recently after the Royal Manx show. Roland Baker, things have changed over the years, but growing up on the Manx farms here in the Isle of Man as a young fella, it must have been great days.
It was, yeah. I really enjoyed growing up on a Manx farm. And I learned one thing that a lot of people need to learn how to do is called work. Just plain work. There are no excuses. But yeah, I grew up on a Manx farm, and I'm very, very happy I did. Absolutely.
Roland, your family weren't directly involved with agriculture. You weren't born into a farming family, but your mum had a great part to play in the stocking of livestock on the Calf of Man.
Only thing I can say is that my mother told me as a young lady, and I think she was born in 1902, she used to help at low tide swim cattle to the actual calf. Then she'd stay for a few days in that old farmhouse there. I mean, that's all she told me, but my mother wasn't much of a story fib teller. So, yeah.
Your mother was a Cree from...
Glenmay.
Was she?
Yeah.
Cree from Glenmay?
Yeah. Her cousin was a Manx farmer's wife, and that's how I got involved in it. It was very easily, actually.
So that would have been Ballaquagan in Maloo?
Ballaquagan Farm, yes, at the Blackboards.
Some of our listeners might even remember some of the people you used to work for, Roland, on the farms back as a young lad.
I worked for Quirks on Ballaquagan Farm, and Reggie Quirk was a great friend of this young lady's granddad, so we often went up there to do a little bit. I went up to go help with the mill when it came, and that was the thrashing. And I was friends out at Ballyglonny with the Corrins and around a few of the... You would get sent to other farms to go help for a while. Some of the names now, my memory's not brilliant, so it faded away.
But they were good days though, Roland.
They were absolutely great days, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. I worked hard and I played hard.
And you worked there for a good number of years before leaving school?
I worked there as a young kid, just growing up I had a cousin called Harry and a cousin called John, and I worked on the farm with them. And then leaving school, I stayed on the farm until I was 24 years old. And then I got an opportunity to go out and cut wheat in Texas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kansas, South Dakota, North Dakota. I went out with a guy called Lyle, who came over as an exchange student to P.M. Kringle's at the Friary in Rebellabeg, and sort of been out there ever since. I migrated then to Montana, and then migrated finally to Alaska, where I have lived for years now. But I became a commercial fisherman rather than a farmer.
But you must have been quite ambitious to up and leave the Isle of Man. We didn't have the internet to make schedules and programmes of travel. You know, you must have been quite a tough character.
Well, I didn't like sitting down. No, there was always something to do. There was something always over the horizon. Yeah. And I've been looking over the horizon ever since I was a kid. So I've been looking over the horizon out in Alaska. I see Russia.
But the years in Montana doing those harvests, acres and acres of wheat.
Acres and acres of wheat. The guy I worked for had 7,000 acres of wheat. And he had 7 combines, all John Deere's, all big ones, and 7 big Ford trucks. So we just actually, when we went combine harvesting, they call themselves custom harvesters. Started in Texas and just cut your way north until we got to his fields, which we then harvested them. And then we spent most of the winter taking them into the machine shop and repairing what all damage was and getting them all ready for the next year.
And how did that harvest compare to the harvest you would have experienced on the Isle of Man as a young boy?
Well, it's multiplied, like about 1,000-fold. If you got 7 combines in the same field all coming up, as you might say, in tandem, which is the wrong number, but just the same, you're cutting a lot of wheat. We cut with 16-foot headers. Any bigger was a bit cumbersome because as you tipped a bit, the corner of the header would then dig into the soil. So 16 foot was plenty. But you could take your header off and put it on a trailer and load the actual combine onto a truck. I could do it in about 45 minutes.
Jeez.
Or vice versa the other way.
And that was a good number of years ago now, Roland. So the technology out there will have increased and expanded somewhat even since then.
Absolutely. I mean, I have not been around a combine harvester now for years. Like I said, I became a commercial fisherman and a commercial fishing boat repairman.
So you were always into the mechanics of everything that you've ever done. Repairing these fishing boats, Alaska is one of the main places in the world for sea fish. How was there many repairs?
Some of you might have seen a program on your TV called The Deadliest Catch. It's about catching king crab out in the Bering Sea. You're not running along the shore, you're way out at sea. From where we fished to the town of Dutch Harbor when we got done fishing at 12 knots was 26 to 30 hours away. So we were way out at sea. But anyway, Kodiak itself has got 700 fishing vessels. Kodiak, the town of, it's the second largest fishing port in the United States, only superseded by Dutch Harbor, which is actually 825 miles from Kodiak, further out west. So when the fishing boats break down, which is pretty easy, it's easy to get done, and actually life and limbs as well. It was my job to keep them repaired, and I still do.
And that will keep you busy because we watch on the TV, like you say, them seas are wild.
Yeah, there's no comparison to a wild sea if you're trying to work in it. And there was never such thing as a 12-hour day or a 24-hour day. Most of the days were 30 hours.
Yeah, there would be no rest and you would be physically tired.
You're so physically wore out, you start seeing double. All you want to do is lay down and you can't. You have to keep going.
And how many tons of crab and fish will these areas produce in a year? Are they big suppliers of the world's demand?
I can't recall how many tons, but the average fishing boat going back to town would have 30,000 pounds of fish on board, see.
Big business.
Yeah, it is big business, yeah. It's huge business. But I have to say, for the state of Alaska, it is very, very well controlled and maintained. They literally count fish on a daily basis of how many go through a catch station and how many are actually harvested at the canneries. And they add those two numbers together, and you know how many fish were taken out of a certain area at a certain time. And it's all recorded. And if there are not enough fish to get the escapement up the river to produce more fish again, then the season is stopped for a few days until they have got their quota again.
So it is really, really well regulated. The stocks are well looked after.
Absolutely. It is very, very well regulated, 100%.
And you get back to the Isle of Man on an annual basis, Roland. Do you see things changing here over the years? I know you get back to the Friary and Bolaquagan as well. Do you see the landscape and the people changing much?
Yes, and I'm an old man. I would have to say they're changing too much. You've got too much industry here now. It's a farming community, and you're selling farm fields off every day to put a house on it, and that's wrong.
Oh, but it's nice to catch up with your old friends. So, you know, Noel Kringle at the Friary, John Masson at Bolla Cricket as well.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed all my old friends, and I'd like to say that anybody wants to come out to Alaska, you just find Kiri and she knows how to find me. When you get there, it will cost you nothing.
But in Alaska, Roland, you see some of the harshest of winters, some of the wildest of animals.
We see some harsh winters. We get some incredible storms. Also, the island I live on, which is Kodiak Island, is an island of just pure mountains. It's 100 and some miles long and 60 miles wide approximately, and it's all just mountains, and there's only 14,000 people live on the whole island. So we have a lot of snow in the winter, have a lot of ice to drive on the roads, and sometimes the wind blows for days that the airport's never open. So you've got to sort of feed a few extra mouths once in a while.
God. But you was telling me earlier, Roland, that the brown bears, it's just another species along the roadside. It's no big deal for you.
No, we have, according to our Fish and Game Department, they will tell us we've got a brown bear, which is a big bear. He probably goes, a good male will go 1,200 pounds. Some of them up to 1,500 pounds. We have a bear for every square mile. Now, they do hibernate in the winter, but in the summertime, you see quite a few. And if you want to go fishing, which I do a lot with a fly rod, you go down to the particular stretch of river you like, and there's a bear already. I've had one bear on the end of my fishing rod.
Oh, my word.
But anyway.
Scary times?
No, I'm not frightened of them. I am very respectful of them. I yanked the fly out of that fish's mouth. The fly flew past my face at like Mach 7. And the bear picked up the fish and walked over to my left and sat down and ate it. And I sort of eased away to my pickup. But I've seen a lot of bears, yeah.
It's incredible. So you've moved from one island to another. They're vastly different. Would you ever consider living back here?
I have considered this many times and I've tried it. But you've got to chase a few people away. It's a bit too crowded for me.
That was Roland Baker chatting about days as a young fella on the Manx farms and his return home from Alaska.
Yeah, but times were tough and a lot of laughs had and that camaraderie that was with people. But gosh, the work they had to do manually.
Oh, those days of humping the big sacks of corn around and doing everything by hand. You don't realise how mechanised it is now. But to pack bags and go off out to America, to a whole new home, a different type of territory where the freezing temperatures that you hear Roland talk about, it's not for the faint-hearted.
No, it wouldn't do your fear of the cold any good, Kiri.
I don't like the cold at all.
I don't. All right, we'll leave it there for this week's Countryside. Kiri and myself will be back next week with more. So until then, from me, Simon Clark.
And me, Kiri Kermode.
We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, there we are. It was lovely having a walk with Mike along the railway lines there at the west, and that station at Kirkmichael in pristine condition, and the unique shape of the two little gables that they had on them, the two peaks as well.
They were really beautiful buildings, the railway buildings seemingly, and you see ruins of them still around, maybe turned into a house or two or whatever on the track out that side, but you still see that railway look about them, don't you? But it was such an important thing for island life, wasn't it? There was very few transporters then, so it was essential to business.
Yeah, and just the sad demise of it in the late 60s as well, where really it wasn't cost effective. People were using different means of travelling, and I suppose a lot of them worked in the country, so I suppose they took a tractor to where they were going backwards and
This
forwards.
is it. And Roland Baker, on his return home from Alaska, said that very thing of how busy it is here now with the cars and lorries on the road compared to when he was a young boy growing up on the Manx farms. And he chats about how times were very, very different then to what they are now.
Yes, there we go. That was really nice to hear that nostalgic look back. All right, we'll leave it there for this week's Countryside, and we're back next week with more. So from me, Simon Clark.
And me, Kiri Kermode.
We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.